Welcome back, historical detectives. Today, we're diving straight into a brand new explainer for Grade 7 Modern World History, specifically Unit 3, Modern Times. We're going to learn exactly how to investigate the past using something called the source-based model. You know, if you've ever wondered how historians actually figure out what happened decades or even centuries ago, how they manage to separate fact from fiction, well, you are absolutely in the right place. We're not just going to sit here and memorize dates. No way. We're building a toolkit to analyze history like an absolute pro.
So here's your primary mission for this unit. You need to answer one absolutely massive essential question. How did conflict and connection shape the modern world? Literally everything we look at over the course of this unit ties right back to this one central mystery. And we're going to answer it by looking directly at the evidence left behind by the people who actually lived through these incredible global shifts.
To get there, here's our roadmap. 1. Welcome to modern times. 2. Key concepts of conflict. 3. The source-based model. 4. Evidence-based reasoning. 5. Application and transfer. And finally, 6. Connecting to today.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1. Welcome to Modern Times. You are stepping into an era that is incredibly fast, highly interconnected, and honestly, just packed with global conflict. Over the next 13 weeks, you're going to see how societies that were previously totally isolated suddenly slammed right into each other. Just think about it for a second. Before this era, sending a message across an ocean took months, but suddenly, boom, steamships, telegraphs. This explosion of technology meant that a single decision made in a capital city in Europe could almost instantly impact the lives of people in Africa, Asia, or the Americas. It's a period completely defined by shifting power dynamics and intense global struggles.
Moving on to Section 2, Key Concepts of Conflict.
It's wild to see how one major event triggers the next. It's basically a giant historical domino effect across the modern era. We kick things off in the late 1800s with the era of imperialism and this intense, frantic race for empires. The pressures and rivalries built up during that race, they directly explode into World War I between 1914 and 1918. Then, all those unresolved issues and bitter resentments pave the way for World War II just 2 decades later. And the fallout from that global devastation immediately sets the stage for the intense ideological struggle of the Cold War from 1947 all the way to 1991. It is just one continuous, thrilling chain of cause and effect. But hey, before you can solve the case, you've got to understand the motives, right? 2 explosive concepts are the main forces driving this massive chain of global conflict. First up, imperialism. This is when a country extends its power through military force or diplomacy to control other regions. It's kind of like the biggest kids on the playground deciding they get to own everyone else's toys and completely dictate the rules for the whole yard. Second, we have nationalism. This is a fierce identification with your own nation and a push for its interests, often at the direct expense of others. When you have competing nations fueled by intense nationalism, racing to build massive empires, well, you've pretty much got a perfect recipe for a world war. Which brings us to Section 3, the source-based model. So, how do we actually make sense of all this chaos? We use the source-based model. This means you don't just guess what happened. You act like a true detective, heavily relying on textual evidence to draw your conclusions. You've got to read historical documents incredibly closely. Your very first job is to determine what the text says explicitly. You know, the literal facts printed right there on the page in front of you. But keep in mind, that's only step 1 of the investigation.
The real magic happens when we move beyond those explicit statements and start making inferences. An inference is a logical deduction, a conclusion you reach based on evidence and reasoning. For instance, say a soldier in World War I writes a letter home saying, "The mud is up to our knees and the rations are gone." He doesn't explicitly write the words, "We are losing morale." But based on the evidence of those absolutely terrible conditions, you can logically infer that morale was incredibly low, right? Finding that hidden truth, reading between the lines, that is the true work of a historical detective.
Let's roll right into Section 4, evidence-based reasoning. Whenever you sit down to analyze a historical document, whether that's a soldier's muddy diary or a top-secret treaty from the Cold War, you're going to follow 3 exact steps. First, figure out the central idea. Ask yourself, what is this document mainly about? Second, cite your evidence. Pull the exact quotes that prove your point to the jury. And third, and honestly this one is absolutely critical, analyze the point of view. Who wrote this and why did they write it?
Comparing perspectives is a massive part of this unit, mainly because history is almost never one-sided. Imagine you're looking at two primary sources from the era of imperialism. Source A argues imperialism is this noble mission to civilize the world. But then Source B completely condemns it as violent theft and oppression. By applying that source-based model, you detect the bias in both. You figure out how each author's background, their nationality, or their social standing completely shapes the story they're trying to tell. And from there, you evaluate the specific claims they use to back up those arguments.
All right, Section 5, Application and Transfer. So what do you actually do with all this evidence once you've analyzed it? Well, you step directly into the shoes of the historian and build your very own argument. Your task is to build a completely airtight case based on facts, and you'll do that by checking off a few specific steps. You'll introduce clear claims about a historical event. You'll group related ideas logically so your audience can actually follow your train of thought, and you'll use valid reasoning, backing it all up with highly relevant textual evidence gathered straight from your primary sources. That's exactly how you transfer all your detective work into a truly compelling historical narrative.
Finally, Section 6, Connecting to Today. Look, we don't just study history to memorize the past. We study it to actually understand the present. As you wrap up this explainer and kick off your 13-week unit, I really want you to keep this essential question in the back of your mind. How do past conflicts connect to our contemporary world? When you look at the news today, you are literally seeing the echoes of imperialism. You're seeing borders that were drawn after World Wars I and II, and you're seeing the fallout of alliances formed during the Cold War. So ask yourself, how are the conflicts of modern times still shaping the headlines you read this very morning? Keep that historian's toolkit handy, stay curious, and have a blast investigating the fascinating complexities of our modern world.